Good afternoon, everyone. I am Krishna Roy, medical technologist of
MR Bangur Hospital. Today, we have assembled here for discussion some clinically important cases which have been almost lost from our hand, but successfully we got them back. There are some scenarios, yes, all of us we know the best possible ventilatory support for any COPD patient is non-invasive, because invasive procedures call for infections, and once any COPD or AE-COPD presents with internal infection like pneumonia, that endangers patient life. And also we know there are two types of non-invasive ventilation. One is pressure mediated non-invasive support, which is known as BiPAP, and another one is high flow nasal oxygen, which is known as high flow nasal oxygen. Now, efficacy is more controversial. Which one is more efficacious and which one is less? Still, it is controversial and under study. We have also studied a lot both these cases, which one is better. During COVID, we studied this extensively, but we see there both are actually same. But if we think in COPD cases, what happens? In COPD cases, patient's intrathoracic pressure massively raised, and which will lead to acute onset of respiratory acidosis, and patient's intrathoracic pressure will massively raised. So, when we are putting a patient on NIV, we must remember there is a leakage amount, and if the leakage amount is more than 60%, what will happen? There will be actually machine will sense as there is a inspiratory trigger, like patient is want to inhale. So machine will sense this inspiratory trigger and he will constantly inhaling the flow towards patient, and when the patient inhale, he will face a huge pressure in his mouth. So this patient will land into hypoventilation state. Now I am going to present such a case which cases are not to be ventilated with non-invasive ventilation. If at all required, we can ventilate those patients with high flow nasal oxygen, which is flow dependent device, which name is high flow nasal oxygen therapy. Okay, let's go into details. A 72 years old, 65 kg body weight, edentulous male. Please know, the patient is edentulous, and because of this edentulous face, mask which were provided to the patient, that was not properly fitting and there was leakage. And the ABG picture, PCO2 of 92 and pH 7.32, and as we know, for NIV this pH level should be more than 7.25, and we put the patient on NIV. So let us calculate the possible bicarbonate value here. Is this acidosis, is it acute or chronic? So we are going to calculate. For increment of PCO to 92, if I set the mean value of PCO2 is 40, then increment is 50. So for 50, the increment of bicarbonate would be, if I set the mean value of bicarbonate 24, it would be 24 plus or 50, it will be 50. So the resultant bicarbonate will be 39. And here it is 39.1. That means well compensated. So what more we are supposed to do here? We just need to support his own compensatory mechanism by in NIV therapy or high flow therapy or invasive therapy. And what was the lactate value at that time? It was 3.2, a bit high. But PF ratio is, PO2 is 134 and PF ratio is 438. That is saying us that there is no hypoventilation and this patient is not suffering from hypoventilation state. And this increment of lactate may be other causes there. Even in COPD patients, low hemoglobin level may cause increment of lactate. There lots of causes may be. So in next we want to see the additional picture like cell count. What is the cell count? Okay. WBC count of 11.2K where granulocyte 87%. Actually here in our unit we did it in 3-part cell counter machine. If 5-part machine was available to us, this granulocyte would have been divided into further divisions like neutrophil, eosinophils and basophils. But here this granulocyte was calculated in a single head like granulocyte and agranulocyte part. And in agranulocyte part there was lymphocyte and monocyte. And what does it indicate? It indicates presence of acute infection. So this patient was actually suffering from acute exacerbation of COPD. And we know COPD patient must be polycythemic to make compensation with the elevated PCO2. And due to persistent hypoxia, there will be elevation of oxygen dissociation curve towards right side and there will be erythropoietin secretion and there will be erythropoiesis. And here this hemoglobin is 13.5. That means it is in COPD patient it should be more than 14 but here it is 13.5. It is actually proves us that the patient is actually COPD patient. Okay. Then we are going to the end picture. Please say end picture. End picture was PO2 of 92 in case of admission picture and PCO2 came up to 112 and pH 7.14 it came down to 7.14. Previously it was 7.32. So again we are going to calculate is there any compensation or is this increment is acute increment or chronic increment. So let us calculate again. Previously it was 92 and now it is 112. So increment is from 92 it is 20. Okay. For 20 in acute, if I suppose the acute onset of respiratory acidosis, the increment of bicarbonate will be previously it was 39 plus for 20 it will be 2, so it would be 41 and in chronic scenario it will be for 20 again 39 plus for 20, this increment will be 6. So, it will be 45. And here, it is 41.1. That means it is acute increment. So, what do we need here? We are just going to put the patient on mechanical ventilation because this patient he is having a lactate of 5.5. Previously it was 3.2. That means there is associated metabolic acidosis. So we are going to put him on ventilation. So now questions are numerous like what mode of ventilator and how much support, etc. etc. Then let's go into details. First, we must know the normal takes place, how inspiration starts, how inspiration is terminated and expiration starts. Without understanding these, we cannot understand a COPD breath or difference between a COPD breath or metabolic acidotic breath. Okay. Some biochemical changes in blood sensed by the chemoreceptor, which is on the wall of arch of aorta, would stimulate respiratory center about requirement of inspiration, and the chemicals which are the responsible chemicals, they are mainly PCO2, then alternatively low pH, then low oxygen, and the pontine center is called apneustic center. Mainly, as per order received from pontine center, there is initiation of inspiration, and after completion of inspiration, there is again stimulation of mechanoreceptor over alveoli due to stretching. Then there is expiration, which is a passive process. Next, we need to know some pathophysiology about COPD. And what is COPD? We all know it is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Means the obstruction in the airway. Again, what is airway? Airway are the passages through which air enters inside our alveoli and comes out of. Actually, there are chiefly two types of airway. One is large airway, like trachea, principal bronchi, and there is another airway which is known as small airway, like bronchioles. And when there is constriction in small and medium-sized airway, there will be difficulty in exhalation, because we know inspiration is an active process. We can easily intake air by using our muscle power, but expiration is a passive process. Due to the pressure gradient, like trachea and alveolus, the air will come out. So when there is obstruction in the airway, patient or we used to generate extra muscle power. We used to generate the power of internal intercostal muscle to squeeze the thoracic cavity to exhale properly. Now, why there is obstruction? Lung has got two parts. One is alveoli, gas exchange surface. Another is airway, whose function is only to deliver gas mixture to the alveoli and from alveoli to environment. But there are some disease conditions like bronchial asthma, which affects only the airway, and there are some disease conditions like emphysema, which affect only the alveoli, and COPD is such a disease which affects both the pathway, airway and alveolus. So, in emphysema, we know there is over-distension of alveoli. So, fresh air cannot be ruled in. So, there will be hypoxia. Then, what happens in chronic bronchitis? As it is a chronic inflammatory process, there is mucosal edema. So, they are no more openable. Let me draw a picture. Suppose this is airway and this is alveolus. In inspiratory phase, we have our respiratory muscle. We can use those muscles to intake air. So, air easily come in. But in expiratory phase, what will happen? Air is supposed to come out due to these pressure gradients between alveolus and airway. Okay, but when there is bronchoconstriction or bronchial smooth muscle stiffening, this air will not come out and this gradient is lost. So, we have to overcome this scenario, and COPD is such a case. That's what happened with those patients actually. So, what more we have to overcome this scenario? Okay, let us discuss about HFNO and NIV. Actually, both are non-invasive. High flow is flow-dependent device. We used to generate some amount of flow more than the patient physiological flow. in COPD patient, they used to increase their flow further to reduce inspiratory time. And how it happens? Let's calculate again. Suppose my inspiratory pressure is 30 liter per minute. Inspiratory flow, sorry. My inspiratory flow is 30 liter per minute. So 30,000 ml of air is being delivered within a period of 60 seconds. 1 ml is delivered 60 by 30,000. And my tidal volume was 500 ml. So 500 ml is delivered within a period of 60 by 30,000 into 500. So 1 second. This normal peak flow of a normal patient or normal human being. But I am increasing this flow after putting HFNO to 60 liter per minute. Okay. Again, we are going to calculate 60,000 ml of air is being delivered within a period of 60 seconds. 1 ml 60 by 60,000. And 500 ml is being delivered 60 by 60,000 into 500. So it would be 0.5 seconds. So same amount of tidal volume is reaching to alveoli with a short period of time, and that's what do when we put a patient on HFN. And we used to provide a flow of 30, 40, 60 liter per minute. Sometimes it is 80 liter per minute also. And another thing, for 10 liter per minute, we get 1 centimeter of water PEEP. And what does this PEEP do? Okay, I'll discuss a bit later. So, in HFNO, we know it is well tolerated. There is no chance of claustrophobia, what the patient do suffers from. When they are put on NIV with a mask on face very tightly, causes them anxiety. Only discomfort they used to face with HFNO. And if there excessive secretion from nostrils or there is nasal blockage, it can be minimized by oxymetazoline or xylometazoline nasal drops. This is nasal decongestant. The extra flow of air will be beneficial for the patient, of course. Let me explain another thing. Suppose I am running in room or jogging in room, and in contrast I am running on the sea beach. So which situation feels good situation for me? Now in room air there is just normal flow, there is just cool air, but in contrast in sea beach there is an extra flow of air which is hitting on my face, and that extra flow of air is beneficial for me, and this extra flow of air also beneficial for the COPD patient who is already on constrictive disease. So we actually do with HFNO when we put a patient on HFNO. Okay. Next, what about NIV, actually BiPAP? For this, we have to put a mask on patient face. It may be vented or it may be non-vented. During inspiration, they are getting high pressured air in patient's airway, and during expiration, there is less pressure and expiration is complete. But one thing we must remember, when there is leakage of more than 60%, what will happen? This inspiratory flow will not be stopped, and this machine will sense as there is inspiratory trigger, and this machine will continue inspiratory flow in front of patient's airway. And comparatively, when we put a patient on HFNO or invasive ventilation, that is more safer than NIV. So we have to remember all these parameters like saturation, blood pressure, and all these things, or also leakage. And for this patient, it was the worsening condition because we put the patient on NIV. There was leakage, and there was a acute hypoventilation, and that hypoventilation leading to acute respiratory acidosis. Now, when the patient is unresponsive, we have no other option. We just intubated the patient and put him on ventilation. Now, what are the basic pathology we need to know? Number one pathology is bronchoconstriction, narrowing of the airway, which is preventing inspiration and expiration both. Because of this acute onset hypoventilation is proved by change PCO along with increased lactate, means compromised circulatory system. So it is telling us that the patient is having a huge circulatory collapse. So keeping in mind, we have to open the patient's airway and also sufficient venous return to his heart. And this case, patient's heart was already compromised, and that right side of heart, we know this is compromised, and intrathoracic pressure is much more than the desired. All of us, we know, once intrathoracic pressure is much more than 45 to 55, classically it is 45 centimeter of water, venous return decreases, and when venous return decreased, alveoli will be collapsed and pulmonary circulation will be hampered. So, what are the things to maintain here? Let me declare another thing. Here in our unit, we don't believe in sedation or paralyzation because sedation and paralyzer hampers patient own physiological responses. Suppose patient is getting improved or he is getting worsened, but it cannot be sensed as the patient is improving or getting worse when the patient is on sedation or paralyzation therapy. So we actually don't use this sedation and paralyzation. Now what are we need here? Actually he has got two pathologies. One is compromised airway and another is compromised alveolar function. Then what is the way out, or what is the weapon we can use? It is nothing but the utilization of PEEP. And PEEP will open the airway as well as alveoli. What I said earlier. And the pressure gradient between alveolus and airway will ensure us sufficient amount of carbon dioxide washing out to the environment. Now, we need to know how much PEEP is required for this particular patient. And we know as this patient is a COPD patient, he is already a PEEP retainer or auto PEEP retainer. Now, how to determine for this particular patient what is the actual PEEP demand for him? This is called PEEP titration policy. PEEP titration means determining actual amount of PEEP required for a particular patient. If I ask you what is the physiological PEEP or what is the PEEP of a patient? PEEP means what? Positive end expiratory pressure, and it is always supposed to be 0. And until it is 0, this expiratory air will not be, this expiration will not be ceased. When there is positive pressure in intrathoracic environment, expiratory air will be continue to be inhaled, and when there is intrathoracic pressure equivalent to atmospheric pressure, then only expiration will be stopped, and then inspiration will be stopped. Then there will be expiration, and we know which is a passive process. Okay, then what is the utility of PEEP? Number one, it helps us to open up the airway. Suppose I have a rubber tube which is distensible. Now I am blowing some air. What do you think? Only the air will come out through this tube, or it will have some effect on the lateral one? Like the pipe is malleable or bent or broken. Now I am blowing air. This tube or this pipe will be straightened because this blown air have some effect on the lateral wall on this tube. And when we provide some PEEP of a patient, this is also do the same thing. But what about expiratory phase? Actually, there is no such pressure. And what pressure we have, which will be effective even during expiration or throughout the inspiration or respiratory cycle. So minimum amount of PEEP will open up the airway, will keep the airway distended and straight. So what do you think? If PEEP is required, what will be the fate of saturation? Definitely it will be increased. Now, ensuring this airway optimally distended, what are we ensuring? We are ensuring sufficient amount of exhalation. So if there any residual volume is inside alveoli, adequate air is spontaneously coming out from the alveoli. So alveoli are no more over distended. And what is happening to intrathoracic environment? It is gradually decreasing. So venous return is increasing and cardiac output will be increased. So ultimately blood pressure will be increased. Till now we got 2 points. One is saturation and another is blood pressure. Now what is plateau pressure? Plateau pressure is intra-alveolar pressure. So during plateau phase of inspiration, when there is no more inspiration and no more expiration, there is no movement of air column, either inside or outwards. And what will happen? The pressure what is sustained in the alveolar space, it is fixed. Now providing adequate PEEP which will ensure me opening up of the airway and using the extra collected amount of volume from the alveoli, and it will decrease the over distension of alveoli. So what will be the fate of intra-alveolar pressure? If I rectify the PEEP, over distended alveoli will be collapsed now. So this pressure is going down. So points: saturation, blood pressure and plateau pressure, and the last one is tidal volume. These 3 things are going to be increased and one thing is going to be decreased. This is plateau pressure. Definitely 3 things already done. For tidal volume we are going to every 15 minutes we have to increase PEEP by 2 and we have to measure these 4 parameters, and when we reach the optimum pressure there will be again worsen condition of patient. And what was the worsen condition of this patient? This was a purely acute respiratory acidosis. So we are going to fix the PEEP less than the worsen picture. Okay, we have already discussed about PEEP. Now, what are the other special techniques which are to be implemented for this particular patient? For this acute hypoventilation, there will be further bronchoconstriction, and that bronchoconstriction will demand for pressure, and this pressure cannot be controlled only by flow, and disease pathology can never be modified only by flow, because whenever we will try to provide some flow, patient will land into high pressure or high peak alarm, because pressure requirement to provide some amount of volume, it will be quite high. So in other words, in this type of patient we will require pressure control mode, not volume cycle. So we started with pressure control mode. Next, what are the settings of pressure control mode? We have already discussed about PEEP and inspiratory pressure. So I am going about the respiratory rate and how much rate is to be given for type 2 respiratory failure. Type 2 respiratory failure may be of two types. One is acute onset respiratory type 2 failure, where there is acute onset of respiratory acidosis with increased PCO2 level, and another type is chronic type 2 respiratory failure. Those patients are already compensated and they have a borderline respiratory acidosis with increased PCO2 level. And what will be the different techniques for different rates? If we think about acute respiratory acidosis, their main pathology is hypoventilation. So we have to correct the hypoventilation factor. And how can we do this? It is by increasing minute ventilation. And again, what is minute ventilation? This means tidal volume minus dead space volume whole into respiratory rate. So we have to increase the respiratory rate which patients are acutely onset of respiratory acidosis or who is having hypercapnia. So what will happen to chronic retainer? Actually, sufficient carbon dioxide washing out, it takes place in the expiratory phase of respiration. So in a patient who is already a type 2 respiratory failure, chronic type 2 respiratory failure, what should we do in respiratory rate? Let's again a calculation. Suppose we have a respiratory rate of 20. So what will be the respiratory cycle time? It will be 60 divided by 20. 3 seconds. And we know maximum inspiratory time cannot be more than 1 second. So here inspiratory time will be 1 second and expiratory time 2 seconds. It is normal. But again we reducing this respiratory rate to 50. Then what will be the RCT? By 50. So it will be 4 seconds. Again, 1 second for inspiration and expiration will be 6 seconds. Then which one is beneficial for type 2 chronic retainer, chronic carbon dioxide retainer patient? Obviously the last one, because they used to increase their expiratory time by decreasing inspiratory rate. So we are going to decreasing the respiratory rate in type 2 chronic retainer patient, and we are going to increase respiratory rate on acute onset of COPD patient or a hypoventilation patient or respiratory acidotic patient. Now next parameter in ACPC mode is to set inspiratory time. We all know initial setting of inspiratory pressure is 20 to 23 centimeter of water, and always target of inspiratory pressure is tidal volume, and tidal volume will be 6 to 8 ml per kg. Now if I ask you what should be the optimum tidal volume for a patient or for this type of patient who are acute or chronic carbon dioxide retainers? In chronic scenario, what should be the optimum tidal volume? Will it be 8 ml per kg or will it be 6 ml per kg? So again we are going to calculate. Just before this, we just need to know what is the dead space volume. What is dead space volume? It is the amount of air which is not taking part in active gas exchange. Suppose the patient is taking inspiration, some amount of air is always retained his inspiratory tract like nostrils, trachea, larynx, pharynx and bronchi. That air is not taking active part in gases exchange. So that amount of air is continuously retained inside this tract, and how much this amount? It is 15% of tidal volume. And again there is another dead space volume which is alveolar dead space volume. This amounts also 15% of tidal volume. So total dead space volume is 30% of tidal volume. So if I calculate a patient whose body weight is 50 kg and I am providing 8 ml per kg tidal volume. So what will be the total tidal volume? It will be 400 ml. And what will be the dead space volume? It will be 30% of 400 ml. So it will be 120 ml. And again, I am reducing this volume to 6 ml per kg. So it will be 300 ml. So what will be the dead space volume? It will be 9 ml. So type 2 patient who is already a chronic retainer, chronic volume retainer or autopib retainer, we are going to decrease the tidal volume of 6 ml per kg. And always target of volume will be pressure, and this pressure always should be less than peak pressure of less than 40 centimeter of water and plateau pressure of less than 25 to 30 centimeter of water. And next setup of pressure control mode is inspiratory time. Actually there are two ways. One, just put the patient on spontaneous mode and see the Ti by T tot value and the respiratory. We will tell us the respiratory cycle time, and by a simple calculation, this respiratory cycle time into Ti by T tot, it will give us the inspiratory time property. So when a patient is on spontaneous mode, the monitor is showing Ti by T tot is 0.34 and showing the respiratory rate of 34. So what will be the respiratory cycle time? I think it will be 1.76 or 7. With RCT it will be 1.76. So what will be the inspiratory time? Just multiply this Ti by T tot into RCT. Ti by T tot into RCT. 0.34 into 1.76. It will give us the inspiratory time. And there is another way. By multiplying time constant. And again, what is time constant? Time constant means compliance into resistance. And this technique we use usually for mode conversion. When a patient is on ACVC mode, we want to convert this mode to ACPC. Then only we are going to calculate these things. Compliance into resistance. And okay, we have already discussed about PEEP, plateau, pressure, target. I told you, and inspiratory pressure, it is also done. And the left part is trigger and FiO2. Okay, FiO2 should be always less than 50%. And why so? Suppose we have fixed a tidal volume of 500 ml with FiO2 of 21%. And what is being delivered now? It is 500 ml of room air. And what is the main component of room air? it is obviously nitrogen. This amounts to be 78%. And what does this nitrogen do? As they are heavy and inert gas, they are retained inside the alveoli and keep the alveoli over distended or distended. And if we provide a FiO2 of 61%, what are we compromising? Obviously, the nitrogen. Suppose the first 21% of oxygen is provided from room air and rest 40% is being drawn from the pipeline. So, what is the volume? It is 40% of tidal volume. So, it will be 200 ml approx, and this extra volume will be absorbed and keeping the alveoli absolutely empty and prone to phase atelectasis. And the last one is trigger. And what is trigger? It is nothing but the making relationship between machine and the man. There are actually two types of trigger. One is flow trigger and one is pressure trigger. Actually both are equally efficacious. Flow trigger means there would be a running bias flow through the expiratory and inspiratory circuit. And when a patient produces some draw in air from the tube, it will get lost from the bias flow. And machine senses as there is inspiratory trigger and there is flow trigger. And pressure trigger means what? By creating some pressure, by using intercostal muscle, you are creating some flow. Again, it is all the same. And whatever you say, flow trigger and pressure trigger. There are many writings like pressure trigger is more comfortable and flow trigger is difficult, but it is all the same. Now weaning. When we find his initial pathology is over, patient's WBC count came down to from 11.2K to 8.7K. And this patient is much more comfortable on spontaneous mode. We started thinking. Now, weaning protocol. We started thinking for weaning. Now, weaning protocol will give us actually we need to calculate some parameters like work of breathing. Actually, we don't need to calculate this one also. We just calculate the RSBI value. This is rapid shallow breathing index. RSBI means when the patient is on spontaneous mode. It is respiratory rate by tidal volume in liter. Okay. Suppose when we started thinking of weaning protocol, this patient was on spontaneous mode and his respiratory rate was 50 and tidal volume was 400.4. Will give us 34 or something like that, and it should be always less than 105. So we started weaning to reduce pressure support by 2, and our target of lowest possible pressure support is less than 10. But we must remember, when we are reducing the pressure support, actually this patient was PEEP dependent. We have to reduce PEEP first. So, and lowest possible PEEP is less than 6. So, with 6/5, he was having a respiratory rate of 20 and tidal volume was again 400 ml. So, it will be around 50 or something like that. So again it is less than 105. So Next day, we put the patient on TPs and keeping the patient on TPs for a whole 1 day. Next day, we extubated the patient and he was successfully discharged. Thank you so much.